I don't mind a little glare.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. My name is Craig. I'm one of the mods of the Ask a Libertarian Facebook page. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Michael Starry, not a mod on the Ask a Libertarian Facebook page.
However, Mike is definitely a little L libertarian, and I'm just gonna let him rant about this whole. Well, why don't you go ahead and talk about it? It's House File 8 and House File 9, and then what you are trying to do here with it.
So House File 8, House File 9 in Minnesota are universal background checks and red flag gun confiscations, which obviously being human and being a libertarian, you've got to be opposed to. So currently we're trying to fight those. The state level has their own issues. So as a county, we're trying for a Second Amendment dedicated county resolution that would prevent our county resources from being used to enforce those unconstitutional laws. Ultimately, the gist of it. Most of it's just protective measure. Currently, we think the Senate can hold us firm and not pass them, but they'll continue to try. So we have to take a local grassroots effort and protect ourselves from anything else.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these transfer laws that they want to pass a little bit. So if I wanted to say come to your land and use one of your guns to go hunting, what would be the process we would have to go through?
If you are on my property and you were hunting with me, you were within eye shot the whole time, nothing. As long as you don't carry or hold the gun for longer than 12 hours. If we are on the same property, but you have left eye shot, you're no longer part of my hunting party, which means you needed to have a background check performed on you. So you got to go do FFL form 4473, get a background check to loan the gun to that person. And then if 12 hours elapses, they have to do a background check on you to give you back your gun. Every transfer applies that way. The only exceptions are immediate family, mom, dad, son, daughter, grandma, grandpa. Other than that, it's virtually anybody. The only caveat they gave us this year was in an absolute dire emergency situation, as a life-saving implementation, you could transfer without a permit or without a background check done, but you would have to prove that
it was a life or death situation.
And then how long do they have it? Did the life or death situation last that long? So if your sister is in danger and she needed a gun and doesn't have one, you were able to give her your handgun because you know her ex is coming for her.
Mm-hmm.
But then how long does she get to keep that for? You have to be able to prove an imminent threat for this entire time, and that's going to be really, really hard to do. So it puts you in a bad spot. You can't even help protect other people because of that, which is it's a terrible law. It's goofy. It gets crazy. Your cousin that you've known your entire lifetime comes to town and says, hey, let's go target shooting with each other. Great. We're going to target shoot. He's going to go do a little grouse hunting in the woods, do his thing. He wanders off. Now you both are in trouble of a gross misdemeanor for transferring a weapon without a background check because he's no longer hunting with you. This is a major issue, and then he's got to do it again to come back to you, which is even the craziest part. You were cleared. You've done your background checks. You've got your gun. You've loaned it to your buddy. He has to do a background check to give it back to you, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world. There's some legislation for you.
Right. And the red flag laws. Can you explain a little bit exactly sort of the details of the red flag laws as they're written in Minnesota?
Yeah.
House File, is it 9?
House File 9, I believe. Yeah, I get them back and mixed up. I'm down there so much. So the red flag gun confiscations covers everything from obviously your husband or your wife, anybody living in your house, any police officer, any judge at any point in time, domestic partners. Minnesota's law, domestic partner is virtually anyone that has ever lived with you. If they've lived with you for more than a couple of weeks at any point in time, they are considered close enough to you to be called a domestic partner. They can file a red flag. The rule being pushed right now, or the law being pushed right now, is a preponderance of evidence. So if this person comes to you and comes to the police and says, hey, I have reason to suspect this guy is a danger to himself or to others, they say, do you have a sworn statement? And they'll go, absolutely. Here's my sworn statement. And here's the preponderance of evidence. He has a history of XYZ. It could be in 91, he had a drunk driving conviction and he spit on a cop. Well, you've got a history of spitting on people. You're violent. You're clearly a danger to society. You've turned yourself in because of Psychological issues from a marriage divorce. You've had to go and deal with counseling because you had a hard time losing your spouse. Now you've got a preponderance of evidence. Well, look, once he acted violently and once he needed mental health care, great. They say you've got a preponderance of evidence. We can issue the red flag order. They come to your house and take your gun. They have to serve you with papers no further away than 12 hours prior to the confiscation. There is no requirement for them to serve the papers in person. It is by mail if they choose to. Last known address. So they could serve your papers to the last known address you have on file and then go, well, you've been served. You had your chance to represent yourself. Obviously you didn't. The police come, they take your guns, and voila. Now you're stuck without your guns. You're angry. If you're a domestic abuser, you're really angry and you know who to suspect, so you're going to just take it out on them. Minnesota's proposed legislation is a minimum 6-month confiscation of the guns. So even if you can prove 14 days later that you weren't crazy at that moment, you didn't intend to commit suicide or harm another person, the judge says, yep, that's great, you're good, sorry about that. You won't get your guns back for a minimum of 6 months, no matter what. There's no safe storage of your guns. There's a minimum time they're gone. And in order to prove yourself fit, no longer is it a preponderance of evidence, it is the burden of proof, which is the highest legal standard versus the lowest legal standard. So then you're left having to prove at that day, at that time, I was not mentally unstable enough to inflict harm upon myself or someone else. Mm-hmm. Well, how are you going to do that? Right. You need tens of thousands of dollars of psychiatrists that can somehow go back in time and analyze a sworn testimony from somebody else and say, well, we think he was stable. It's probably not going to happen.
Right.
It's an interesting law.
Sure.
It's ripe for abuse.
Right.
Would be a nice way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to backtrack 1 second there, when you say no safe storage, you're talking about not that the guns won't be locked up, but that they won't be stored in a way that will maintain their integrity.
So the police department has no requirements on how the guns are stored.
Sure.
Most of us,
leaky,
exactly,
moldy basement,
and that's usually the case. An evidence room is kind of wherever they have room for crap. So you've got guns rusting, you've got guns being dripped on, you've also got, and there are even photographs. I may have to get one of these days. Boxes just stacked with firearms that they've confiscated. Well, every gun jamming on top of each other. You've got a $2,000 scope on there, and it gets jammed into a box. That's the end of your scope. So now you've got no safe storage requirement for the police, and the current legislation is very specific that there's no legal recourse for you.
Sure.
So if your guns come back to you damaged, they don't come back to you because they were lost. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's specifically written in the law that you cannot then go after the police or the courts for your damaged property.
So basically, confiscation and destruction is sort of written right into the law.
Exactly.
That it's possible.
Without saying we're going to never get these back to you.
That's exactly what
they're
they
going to make sure
do.
you never get them back.
And there's no legal recourse
Exactly.
even if they decide to just melt them publicly and announce it, there's still no legal recourse.
Nothing you can do about it.
Nothing you can do about it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I mean, if I can't even imagine like applying this to like a motor vehicle. Like, I heard that guy drives recklessly.
Exactly.
So they take your car and destroy it.
Yep. It's beyond civil asset force.
Right? Yes, exactly, beyond. That's very interesting.
And then there's no recourse. The only allegation, or the only issue you have is a false claim. If it is later proven that it was a false claim, it's a basic misdemeanor.
Oh, nice.
So virtually anybody, misdemeanor in Minnesota is a $25 fine.
Yeah, right.
Hey, sorry about that. Here's $25.
Yeah, you'd be worse off getting caught without a seatbelt.
Exactly.
That's about a $150 fine, I think.
Stuck in caught without
something
seatbelts.
like that.
That sounds about right, though. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that is what is proposed with House Bill or House File 8 and 9 here in Minnesota. Here in Crow Wing County, you are a representative of
I don't know if I'm a representative or if I am the movement. So yeah, the standard, everybody wants a sanctuary county movement, and it kind of became a thing here I was asked to join this Facebook group, and within a couple of days I was told, well, this one's in yours. Good luck. So I took on this fight to try to get what we're calling a Second Amendment dedicated county resolution. It's essentially the sanctuary movement, but we don't like the term sanctuary because there's negative connotations. There's legislation afoot, state and federally, to ban or defund sanctuary communities. So if we pass a resolution, we automatically would be messed up anyway. They would take that right away from us. Defund the county.
So yeah, literally the word sanctuary would actually lead to legal consequences,
exactly.
Not only just sort of the attachment to something we're not necessarily want to be attached to.
It's a bit of a double whammy, and it's a terrible thing because the word sanctuary should have good connotations.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic term, and it's been used historically for so many great things. It got bastardized, and that's a terrible situation. Neither here nor there on our fight, but not calling ourselves sanctuary does definitely alleviate some of that stress factor. Oh, you're going to do this, or no? It's all about the Second Amendment. So went with a dedicated. The concept is exactly the same. A resolution stating that our county will not use county resources or county taxpayer funds to enforce any future gun laws or anything we deem unconstitutional. It allows our sheriff to not have to go enforce these rules. It allows us to not be able to even loan county resources. We couldn't take the county assault vehicle that they use and loan it to the city police department to do this, because that would be an allocation of county paid for resources. That's one way that we can at least defend against this, ultimately unconstitutional laws.
Right.
There's no due process. You never get to face your accuser. You never get, they have no representation here. Like, they come in, they do their sworn statement, and they're done. That's it. Now you face a judge and a police officer in court and everything. You never ever get to see the person that accused you of this. They've sworn their statement, they're out, their name is sealed, and that's the last of it. So automatically, no right to face my accuser. You've taken my stuff before a conviction, due process is gone. And they're willfully and happily trying to shove this down our throats. So the Second Amendment resolution is to defend against that. At least protect the last little bit of due process that we have remaining. Thank you, Patriot Act, for making a bunch of that go away.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any fans in the audience for that one either. All right. So, we'd basically set up a sanctuary that our county dollars couldn't be used to enforce this state law. All right. So House File 9 and House File 8 passed already in the Minnesota House. And now it's going to the Senate. Where do you think its future is there? Because I know that our Governor Walz, and I'll leave it at that, I won't editorialize, would definitely sign this if it comes to his desk. And I'm sure he hasn't read it.
No, and I wouldn't expect him to, especially because it applies to the rocks and cows out here in outstate Minnesota, which is a terrible spot to be in. So yeah, it did. It passed the House. Now, one nice caveat there is that there were 5 Democrats who voted against its passage. Now, the Democrats do have enough sway in the House that they were able to still get it through, but we do have 5 outstate liberals, if you will, that voted against this because they understand the importance of this as well. Moving into the Senate, it's a
only 5.
Yeah, the 5 out of all of
in Minnesota.
Yeah, so that's a little tough fight.
I mean, there's a lot of rural counties in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to say these words, and I might have to rinse my mouth out, but thankfully those counties are Republican strongholds. Doesn't benefit me in most things, but on the Second Amendment fight, they're pretty good on that. So, and that's where we're at with the Senate. We have a Republican majority in the Senate, and they've all vowed to vote against these, which is wonderful. But anything can happen. We do have a few senators that are, absolutely fantastic people. Great Republicans, as it were, but they're very principled, and their whole purpose is to vote their constituency. If their constituency swings in favor of this, there are a couple of them that will, whether they like it or not, will vote in favor of the gun control because their people have said, this is how I want you to vote. So it's not a guarantee that we can block it. It looks like it this year. They seem to be making that known, but then what happens next year? what happens the year after? The House Democrats have outright stated that they will continue to push this.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, saying 5 Democrats and looking at, I mean, how it's amazing to me that this issue has become so partisan in a rural area like Minnesota, because we don't have a very high crime rate.
No.
Especially in the rural areas. Most of our crime is in the metro area. But probably the majority of the guns are in the rural area where they're used for hunting. So I'm surprised to see such a push from the Democrats for this legislation when there doesn't really seem to be much of a need for it. And like I said, it just sort of seems to be a sway against the culture itself.
And that's ultimately what it looks like. I made reference to the rocks and cows. I mean, that's Governor Walz's own words.
Yeah.
Specifically, he in one breath
his own little deplorable quote.
He's in one breath he says we're one Minnesota, and in the next breath he refers to us as rocks and cows.
Yeah.
So we're not kowtowing to what the Metro wants, and that's got him infuriated. The one point they have that they balance their thing on is the suicide rate per capita in outstate Minnesota is higher than it is in the metro area, and it's mostly middle-aged white suburban or white rural males. A lot of that can be attributed to farm closures, lack of employment opportunities.
For sure.
Emotional things like that. So they use that as their reason for red flags. Well, we're trying to save you guys up there.
I think those numbers could be easily skewed, though. I would imagine that overdoses are much higher in the metro area than they are in the rural area. And I would venture to say that probably at least 10%. I mean, I'm really spitballing here, but I would imagine that there's definitely some overdoses that are actual suicides.
Oh, yeah.
That just, they get counted as overdoses.
Yeah.
That was the method.
I believe it was last year, I think the number was 402 suicides in the state, and I believe it was just under 200 of them were firearms related. So you've got double the number that are other means.
But those numbers are so incredibly low.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. We have no homicides in the state per se. 102 last year in the state of Minnesota, the whole state. 102 homicides.
Yeah.
We're worried about this. I mean, it is some silly legislation. It's part of the do something culture that we have right now. Everybody screamed it after every mass shooting. We've got to do something. We've got to do something. Well, this is what we get when we've got to do something. We get really bad legislation. And you look at the red flags, we already have it. Minnesota allows a 72-hour hold for anybody that's an imminent threat to themselves or another. They take the person, the problem. The person in crisis gets hauled off to mental health facility, and they get the help they need for their crisis.
Yeah.
The person in an agitated state that wants to kill other people gets counseling and gets thrown into either a jail cell or a mental health bed, and we help the person in crisis. The new proposed law is, well, to heck with the person in crisis, let's just take their guns.
Yeah.
That'll stop it. That'll make them feel better. And I don't think that if I'm suicidal and I'm threatening suicide, I don't feel like a cop kicking in my door, charging into my house, shooting my dog, and taking my guns is going to make me less likely to kill myself. At this point, I'm even more agitated. I'm even more down. Now you've killed my dog and you took my stuff. Great. Now I'm just going to go slice my wrist and be done with it. And I mean, even people that are suicidal go, well, it's probably less painful than shooting yourself in the face, So you can convince yourself to do a lot of things in a lot of ways. This legislation is not going to stop it. It's going to redirect how these acts are committed. And the homicide rate is virtually non-existent in the state of Minnesota. You're making no impact, and study after study have shown it never does anyway.
Yeah.
None of the universal background checks or red flags actually lower the overall homicide or suicide rate in any state they've been implemented. They may lower the gun deaths, but they haven't lowered the overall rate. So you're clearly not stopping suicides or murder. It doesn't go away. There's no magic button for that one, sadly.
All right, last couple things. Promote your page here and tell people what they can do in Crow Wing County in Minnesota and across the United States to help this cause. You guys should set up a Patreon and
yeah,
get those buttons and stuff.
It'd be nice to not come out of my pocket.
Yeah.
Our page on Facebook is Patriots for a Second Amendment Crow Wing County dedicated resolution. I don't have any other websites, but you can track us down there. You can go to Crow Wing County on Facebook, just search Crow Wing County Second Amendment. Our page will pop right up. Check us out. It's open to people anybody can take a look. We try to keep it a little dialed into residents because we don't need the outside influence.
For sure.
We've got multiple paper petitions running all over our county, which is fantastic. We're getting signatures by leaps and bounds. We started the group a couple weeks ago. We've got 3,600 members on our Facebook page, a couple thousand signatures on our paper petitions, and our online petition, which is also available on change.org. Same thing, Crow Wing County Second Amendment. It'll show up on there. So if you're a resident, feel free to sign up if you're in support of it. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, you can contact me right through that group on Facebook if you have questions. You want to know what this is really about. You want details on the laws. Ask away. I'm happy to provide you all the information we can get. So. And then, tell your friends. We don't want these. Due process matters. It's highly important. It's a constitutional principle. We should have stuck with it. They're chasing it away. We need to stand on that as a last bastion of freedom, because if we don't stop from taking our crap before we've done something wrong, we're down a really ugly rabbit hole.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Thank you all for tuning in.